Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about the 2025 Virginia gubernatorial election, and I apologize, I haven't been very active on this channel here recently, and I don't want to make promises for the future necessarily to be crazy active, but I do want to start being more active here and trying to discuss and analyze these races as we get into the 2025 November elections, and then not only that, but going into the 2026 midterms and also doing some 2028 content while we're at it. But in today's specific video, we're going to be talking about Virginia's gubernatorial election in 2025. The race is set. It's Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl-Sears versus former U.S. Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger. These two candidates one of them is going to make the first female governor of Virginia and is going to replace Glenn Youngkin come January of 2026. This election is very important for the future of not only the Republican Party, but also the Democratic Party. The Republicans were able to flip this race 4 years ago because Glenn Youngkin focused a majority of his campaign on education and making sure that parents had the right to their kids' education. And this came at a time when Joe Biden, then the president, was not very popular with the American people. He had went through about half of the year in 2021 after he took office with a very high approval rating, but by the end of the summer, it really was starting to tank with the Afghanistan withdrawal and a multitude of other factors, including the economy. It caused his campaign to really boost. Glenn Youngkin's and Terry McAuliffe, who was the Democratic nominee and former governor, remind you, lost this election to Glenn Youngkin by nearly 2 percentage points. Many expected Terry McAuliffe to actually pull this off until about the last 2 weeks of this campaign. If we go down to the general election and look at some of the later polling, if I can find it. So until about the last couple weeks, we've really seen that Terry McAuliffe seemed to have this in the bag, but we've seen, right after, especially Terry McAuliffe's debate too, he said some controversial things with regard to Glenn Youngkin, and Youngkin just was able to run campaign ads, and it really benefited Glenn Youngkin's campaign overall. And remind you that Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl-Sears won a separate campaign this same year with Glenn Youngkin as the Lieutenant Governor in Virginia. All of them run separate, including the Attorney General, Jason Miyares, also won, and he's up for re-election in Virginia in 2025. But back to 2021, Glenn Youngkin was able to pull this off, and this environment that we're getting ready to go into here in 2025 is going to be much different. We already see President Trump at a disapproval rating, and a lot's going on in American politics right now. We have people saying that the Democrats don't really have a strong leader, and while I would have to agree with it, it is clear that at the same token, people are not the biggest fan of President Trump. So looking at this race specifically, we see two women who are going to fight this off, and it's really going to kick off come this summer. This race is really going to kick off, and we're really going to start to see how the race is going to shape out. I'm going to be honest, I think Winsome Earl-Sears has a uphill battle on this campaign. Looking at Abigail Spanberger, she's kind of got the booster here. We have a President Trump, who is in office already, not necessarily the most approved of person going into the job, and especially as he started his work in the White House. People are also against it. While President Trump sure does have his supporters, a lot of people are not quite the fan of the work he is doing, and this may be a chance for Democrats to show that they do not like the work the president is doing, and that he needs to change something before the midterm elections. But we'll see. I don't want to get above myself on that regard. But if we look at some of the polling we see right now, we haven't seen polling in nearly 2 months for this election, which honestly kind of comes crazy to me, because within the past couple of weeks, these two women became the front runners. The race was set with both of them winning their respective parties' nomination just a couple weeks ago. So Lieutenant Governor Sears and former Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger are already set for this race. This in February, January, and late last year, this was hypothetical polling. But now we're talking about the race is set, and we haven't seen really a lot of polling out of this race. I mean, like I said, the last polling that we've seen was in February, and we've seen Winsome Earl-Sears trailing quite a bit in some polls, especially from the Roanoke College. But in some, it was a closer race, of course, with Republican-leaning pollsters. But at the end of the day, like we've said before, Abigail Spanberger has the upper hand here. There's just no doubt about it. But again, we won't know exactly how this race is shaping out until we can really start to see some of the polling. And of course, there's also questions about polling going into 2025. We've seen in the 2024 presidential election, of course, President Trump always outperforms polls. That has been something that is known about him, is when he is on the ballot, he always outperforms polls. But truthfully, going into the 2024 general election for President Trump, the race was close. And many thought it was going to be a nail-biter, maybe even down to Pennsylvania. We didn't really know what was going to happen, but we thought that it was going to be close. It ended up not being close at all. President Trump outperformed every poll and really brought in a victory that nobody seen coming, except for people who really paid attention to politics and seen the 2016 campaign and seen how that flipped overnight. So people knew it could be coming, of course, but at the end of the day, pollsters and other pundits predicted that the race was going to be close, and it didn't end up being so. So going into this race, we've seen that 4 years ago, Glenn Youngkin won this race by 2 percentage points. Final polling had this a neck-and-neck race, ended up coming down pretty close to the wire, but Glenn Youngkin had a pretty significant victory for a state that, remind you, just a year earlier voted for Joe Biden by 10 percentage points. Come to 2024, that number has been split in half. Kamala Harris only won Virginia by 5 percentage points. Let's remind you that Virginia wasn't called until late in the night on election night in 2024. Totally different than 2020. And of course, it was a totally different environment. President Trump outperformed overall. But this is really important going into this election and future elections in Virginia as well, going into this 2026 Senate election, where possibly Glenn Youngkin may be the front runner to seek that nomination for the Republican Party for the Senate seat. Of course, if he does, he'll be running a tough campaign, probably against Mark Warner, who would possibly, very likely, be the Democratic nominee if he chooses to run. But back to the 2025 race. This race is shaped up. We're going to start to see more in the coming months, and we're really going to be able to determine how this race is going to play out. I'm going to be honest. The historical context, the odds are against Winsome Earl-Sears here. But of course, she did win this the lieutenant governor's race 4 years ago in a statewide office. So Abigail Spanberger hasn't won a statewide office, but she is rumored to be a pretty positive candidate, a pretty popular one at that the Democrats are very confident going into 2025 with her. So we'll see what happens. I will keep an eye on this election. I look forward to making future videos about this race because I think it's really going to shape out to be quite an interesting one. I do think, as of right now, Abigail Spanberger does have the upper hand, but of course we'll have to see. And even if she does, it'll be interesting to see how large her victory is, because I truthfully don't think it's going to be as large as some people may believe if she does end up winning. But of course, like I said already, we will continue to look at this race, continue to make videos on it in the future, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.